Welcome to Eastern Air Command. How are you?
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our interview with Air Marshal S.P. Dharkar. He is the Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Indian Air Force's Eastern Air Command. The Eastern Air Command has a large area of responsibility and is tasked with protecting India's eastern borders. Air Marshal Dharkar was also the first Director General of the Defence Space Agency at Bangalore. Air Marshal Dharkar joined the Indian Air Force in June 1985, and he is a highly accomplished fighter pilot with over 3,600 hours on various types of aircraft. Air Marshal Dharkar is also unique in that he belongs to a small fraternity of pilots who've flown the swing-wing MiG-23 BN and MiG-27 fighter aircraft. We'd like to thank Air Marshal Dharkar for his time today amongst his busy commitments. Thank you for your time, sir.
No, thank you so very much, Atul, for having me here.
So the Air Marshal will tackle some questions from us now. He's kindly consented to spend some time with us today for this interview. We'd like to also thank the Indian Air Force for making this possible, and we hope that you find this interview interesting on the roles and responsibilities of Eastern Air Command. Air Marshal Dharkar, if you could just let us know the various roles and responsibilities that come under Eastern Air Command.
All right, let me put this Eastern Air Command area of responsibility into a little perspective. Operating out of Shillong here, which is the headquarters of the Eastern Air Command. This is the only air command in India which shares national boundaries with 5 nations. So we have the nations of Nepal, China, Bhutan, Myanmar and Bangladesh. And we have various different kinds of terrain here, starting from sea level in the West Bengal area and going all the way up to almost mid 20,000s in the Sikkim zone. And given the fact that we have also the Brahmaputra plains in between, the weather in the eastern part of India is also very daunting. So yes, this is unique in its own way.
The Eastern Air Command also operates some of the newest assets of the Indian Air Force. Air Marshal Dharkar, if you could just take us through the capability that these new platforms have brought to the Air Force, as also the power projection you can bring to bear in the region of interest.
In the recent decade, actually, the Indian Air Force has gone out into acquiring cutting-edge technology. While yes, the armed forces across the world always vie for getting the latest in technology because it equips each with that much more operational capability. And the Indian Air Force is no different. And in the recent decade and a half or so, we've had significant new inductions in the Indian Air Force, whether it starts from the C-130s, the C-17s, the Chinooks, the Apaches, and the Rafale, of course, which is one of what we've got in the very, very recent past. Add to it, we are building capabilities also in our surface-to-air weapons capabilities, both in terms of the MR-SAMs which we've got inducted, in terms of the S-400s which we've inducted very recently. And all in all this contributes to incremental capability. Notwithstanding that, however, even the old equipment that we continue to operate provides its own punch in terms of getting things to the table. Sometimes even quantity has its own quality.
The Indian Air Force has very rapidly operationalized the Rafale fighter jet. If you could just take us to maybe a few aspects of this aircraft and the capabilities it brings to the Air Force, as also the role of your Su30 MKIs that you also operate in this region.
Well, I'll start off in the reverse sequence first. The Indian Air Force has been operating the Sukhois from the late 1990s actually, and the Sukhois bring to the table a host of capabilities. And when we initiated acquiring the Su30s, we were already in the process of working out as to what next generation fighter we would be acquiring. And towards that, the Air Force had gone into a real big assessment of various different types, of which we finally selected the Rafale as what would be our frontline fighter. And now having acquired the Rafales add to the capabilities that we inducted with the Su30s. The Su30s, of course, being quite a large variation from what the Russians were operating as a homegrown fighter at that time. Of course, coming from the Su-35 stable as well, and having a large commonality with the Su-27, the Su-35 and the Su-30 somewhere in between. But all in all, the Rafale adds to whatever the Su-30s brought to the table, and they've merged very well with the other platforms that we were operating, and they bring to the table what is almost the newest in available technology around the world. Currently, I would like to believe that the Rafale can hold its own against almost any fighter that you can pitch against it the world over.
Could you give us an indication as to when you would like to induct or hope to induct the indigenously developed light combat aircraft Tejas? Because that is one arrow missing from the quiver of Eastern Air Command.
Actually, it's not so much as missing as in having been deployed directly in Eastern Air Command. We have operated the LCA also here for some of our exercises. It is just that we haven't yet based the LCA here, because as the numbers keep building and HAL provides the Air Force with more and more LCAs, I'm certain that it's positioning one LCA squadron somewhere in Eastern Air Command is almost on the cards, if not already here.
Infrastructure building is also key for Eastern Air Command. If you could take us through in some of the new developments that you have in this arena, as also the advanced landing grounds that are now being quickly upgraded and modernized.
Two challenges about Eastern Air Command, historical challenges and geography, have actually resulted in a little slower development of infrastructure in this region than has been seen in the rest of the country. But I'm certain that that is one little shortcoming that has been recognized, and I would say the last about decade and a half, or definitely the last decade, have seen a significant push in terms of infrastructure development here. Whether it is in terms of roads and communications, whether it is in terms of the number of airfields that we operate at, and given the nature of the terrain, we find that it is easier and more relevant probably to have advanced landing grounds which are not quite fully equipped airfields as one would normally expect, but provide a significant capability in their own right. And especially for Air Force operations, as also for limited operations in the civilian domain, the advanced landing grounds provide that much better for connectivity in some of the far-flung reaches of this particular area of responsibility.
Could you give us some indication of the challenges of airborne operations in this terrain? It's hilly terrain, the weather changes very frequently. You've got, of course, high altitude areas as well. If you could just give an indication to our viewers of the challenges that you have to operate in this part of the world.
Actually, your question covered the challenges very succinctly already. The challenges come from the weather in this part of the world. We have a very strong monsoon. We have a rather riverine region with the Brahmaputra Valley, and that has its own limitations in terms of how you could deploy and when you could deploy. Given the fact that terrain stems all the way down from sea level all the way up to about 25,000 feet at the highest, one finds that crossing the Himalayas, which once were a very daunting task for an enemy, given air power today, are not as daunting as they seem. But yes, we do operate in these kind of terrain. We do make it a point to exercise frequently to overcome challenges that wind, water and weather pose. And we build capabilities on ground in infrastructure as well as equipment terms to overcome those challenges. I think we'll operate 24/7 and all across this AOR with impunity when required to do so.
Right, sir.
Drones and unmanned vehicles add to capabilities significantly. They have some of their own intrinsic capabilities which we are exploiting more and more, whether it is for ISR or even better. I'm certain that they bring to the table a host of capabilities that otherwise would have not so efficiently been acquired. And as regards operating them from advanced landing grounds, of course the drones are as possible to be operated from there as anywhere else. The question then arises as to whether, given the capabilities of modern UAVs, we would require to actually position them there to operate them from there, or we could very well position them elsewhere into deeper territories and operate them just as well from those deeper locations. But yes, the capability exists and it can be utilized if a need so arises. They actually require a reasonably small footprint on ground, and there's not too much of infrastructure that you would require to operate them from wherever you position them. And I think we will keep that in mind as well and utilize them accordingly whenever the need arises.
Could we get an insight from you, Air Marshal, on Eastern Air Command's preparation for induction of more advanced drones? And would it be fair to say that the Air Force is only going to grow drone operations within the service.
While newer drones bring a host of additional capabilities, and both in quantum terms and in quality terms, it also comes alongside with much lesser footprint on ground. They are simpler to operate. They require lesser background infrastructure creation, and one could actually relocate them in many cases with much more simplicity in much more rapid time frames. And we look forward to having that kind of capability here. The amount of flexibility it will provide, the kind of capability that it will provide, and the amount of overall addition to existing capability, I think, will be a game changer when they get in. And yes, we are quite prepared to accept them and operate them whenever the drones get provided. Given the fact that many of our border outposts are significantly displaced from the current roadheads, yes, the Air Force does provide a lifeline to Army deployments in far-flung areas. But that's a matter that is changing, and it's changing with development of roads and infrastructure. It is changing with better availability of our own mechanisms to provide men and material to these far-flung locations in terms of helipads and the like as well. At the same time, there is more and more jointness, bordering almost integration with the Army, and that goes in every facet of what we do, whether it is in terms of simply providing the ability to position men and material where required, or to share capabilities in terms of surface to air weapons, or in terms of both air defense and in fact even better. In fact, the Army also operates UAVs in this zone, and we share both what they bring to the table and what we have of our own as well.
Marshal, if you could take us through some of the innovations of Eastern Air Command in terms of indigenization. We know that the government is strongly backing the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. If you could get a sense from you as to some of the initiatives at Eastern Air Command in this regard.
Two initiatives by the government are particularly notable as regards our operational capabilities and its development. The first, of course, is Atmanirbhar Bharat, which you talked about, which I will touch upon in a moment. And the second is the Gati Shakti initiative, which is resulting in significantly fast-paced infrastructure development in this zone. Given also these two, one also perceives these days that civil infrastructure is also developing at a fast pace. You know, the impetus to tourism, the impetus to the development of airfields and even road connectivity, incremental railway lines and the like, some kind of riverine transport that is being built up, and all in all, even economic development in this zone is actually all adding up to providing more and more footfall, more and more ability at local level, and therefore alongside with it more and more capacity and capability building for the armed forces. To touch upon what you mentioned about Atmanirbhar Bharat, actually I think that is an initiative that should have come in a long time ago. You know, like it's said that the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, but the second best time is today. Well, now is as good a time as any. And as we recognize, given our equipment fit, we find that, you know, geopolitical trends across the world are actually affecting us in our day-to-day operations and our preparedness, when we find that actions that take place in Europe or maybe the Middle East actually come back to inhibiting our continued capability, and we find that a challenge. Towards that, I believe Atmanirbhar Bharat is what will take us much further forward, and in the years and decades to come, I think it's going to serve us very well.
Marshal Dharkar, if you could also just take us through the capability conferred by your new assets, the C-130J for example, the Chinook for example, and especially with regard to jointness, interoperability with the Indian Army. If you could just give us a brief insight on how these two platforms are really transforming your operations in the region.
In both cases, in the two cases that you mentioned, the C-130s as well as the Chinooks, what they bring to the table is the capability to operate out of very difficult and small areas, the ability to carry a large amount of men and material, and the ability to put it there in very quick time. Given the fact that this is daunting terrain with currently limited infrastructure, both these bring to the table that capability that we can induct troops, whether we can induct troops and maintain them and assist them at the drop of a hat. And I think that that is something that that significantly adds to our both interoperability with the Army, as also in terms of providing that much more joint capability when the need arises.
And Marshal, would it be fair to say that the sophisticated avionics that you now have on your C-130Js, on your Chinooks, on the advanced light helicopter Dhruv, on the Mi-17 V5s, these contribute to a significantly higher mission accomplishment rate, because you can fly in probably weather that one just could not, maybe even 10-15 years ago?
Actually, you're absolutely right about the fact that it provides us greater capabilities across domain. What it actually adds to is the fact that it is simpler to do now using all this equipment, things that really required significant amount of training and expertise as well as experience in the past. So you find that our young aircrew and our young operators and our young air warriors take to these particular pieces of equipment very, very much quicker. Some time ago in our conversation you pointed out about how quickly we operationalize the Rafale. It is probably this new equipment fit that makes it possible, and the fact that thereafter imaginative intervention at various levels of the entire hierarchy makes it even faster. So you have a set of aircrew and air warriors who are required to either fly or maintain those birds, and you have a set of equipment that facilitates such quick absorption of new technology. So it kind of merges into that much additional capability in quick time. And the same is true about the other aircraft that you mentioned also. They are that much more capable, they are that much more reliable, and they require that much simpler learning curve than we have experienced in the past. And so our new equipment and our new avionics provide us the ability for our aircrew to utilize them with that much more alacrity than was kind of available when we were younger. So they take to it like fish to water.
And Marshal Dharkar, if you could take us through your chief priorities as the C&C of Eastern Air Command, what are your areas of focus at this point of time?
Other than what one would believe are the operational areas of responsibility, what chiefly happens in this part of the world is the vagaries of weather that bring in their own challenges. Climate change is affecting us in its own way, and the Eastern Air Command has terrain of very daunting nature. Towards that, we at Eastern Air Command find ourselves significantly involved in providing assistance to government, in providing assistance to local government, in providing assistance in terms of moving civilian men and material from some of the far-flung areas of our country, as also in terms of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, which spans from assistance during floods, earthquakes at times, or even natural calamities like you recently saw in Sikkim, wherein we had several of the bridges washed away as a result of a very strong water burst from one particular zone. Added to that, it cut off many portions of Sikkim, and to that then Eastern Air Command was called upon to provide that capability that was the fastest that anybody could have got into the area, and I think we did a reasonable job out of it. We have managed even in the past, even before that, to help in providing succor to people affected by the floods in Brahmaputra Valley, or in terms of providing quick men and material to aid civilian authority in the event of an earthquake and the like. And that is a continuing process. In some portions of Arunachal Pradesh even today, or in terms of or in some portions of the other states here, we also ferry men and material to the far-flung areas, and we do that proudly. We enjoy it.
As Commander-in-Chief, you're also tasked with not only your immediate operational responsibilities, but keeping one eye out on the future as to how the situation would evolve for the Indian Air Force and Eastern Air Command in particular. Could you take us through some of the transformational initiatives currently underway within Eastern Air Command to prepare your command for the future?
Preparing for the future takes some kind of a leaf out of every book. Everybody does that. Importantly, one normally tends to believe that preparing for the future caters for new equipment and new infrastructure and the like. What actually comes to the table then is a little different. New equipment, new infrastructure does not mean that you can do away with what you have. And we think that it is more important to find better ways of more efficiently and more effectively using what we have and building on it, rather than looking at what else we are going to get afresh. In that regard, at Eastern Air Command, we've been looking, and significantly so, as to how we can overcome the various challenges we face for geography or for weather, and manage to actually improve our ability to operate out of each of our locations in better manner than we have done before, through a greater cycle through the daytime as we've done before, in managing the resupply to these locations as we may require to do when we want to increase the tempo of operations from there, whether operations in peacetime or operations in the event of wartime. And that is what we are building on as we speak. So, looking at the background processes, making them more efficient, looking at how we can involve other agencies of the government or the other services in helping us accelerate that process, and so building that capability is what we are actually looking at more often than not. Resources will always be a challenge. I cannot imagine any armed force in the world, whether on land, air or sea, who believes that they have more equipment or more resource than they need. One always needs more, or one always believes one needs more than what one has. But I think the better way is to make the most of what we have, and then look at what comes in your way in due course, and see how best that merges with what you've already built in terms of capability and capacity.
As a journalist, I've been covering the aerospace and defense industry for more than a decade. And while many of us are enamored with the platforms, these amazingly sophisticated platforms that all of us see, I've come to realize that it's actually the men and women behind these flying machines, behind these platforms, that make any air arm or any defense service what it actually is. We'd love to hear from you, Air Marshal, on the key of the Indian Air Force, which is the men and women in uniform who have made this a combat winning, a highly potent Air Force. If you could just take me through a little bit of the people that you have under your command.
I'm really grateful that you time and again pointed out that it's the men and women, and I'd like to focus on that for a moment, because it's an age-old adage that it's the man behind the machine that makes it count, and more importantly now it's the men and women behind those machines that would make it count. As we evolve and given other challenges as well as new initiatives at various locations and new opportunities that are available to young men and women all across the country, we find that having people trained and having people trained quickly is what is making all the difference. We have new equipment, we have modern equipment, we have cutting edge technology, but unless we can build the ability to use it effectively, we would be failing in terms of what that equipment could bring to the table. We have a lot of various new mechanisms that we are using to induct people. Given the fact that the young generation is a little more inclined towards trying out a variety of things before they settle onto any one particular career or one particular avenue of work, we have also been trying to match our means of induction and our means of retention into how we believe that the young generation would like it better. And this is both at the officer level as well as in our airmen and airwomen. We have inducted a large number of young men and women into short service commission as officers. And now with the Agniveer Vayu program, we are also going to let them have the opportunity of seeing what it is to serve in the Air Force before they choose as to whether they would like to stay on and continue to serve for longer durations, or whether they would like to find other avenues where they would use the skills that they have acquired and use them gainfully in also assisting themselves and society at large. Towards that, whether it is the manner in which we regulate training now, or whether it is the manner in which we induct more and more people into the future, we find that unless we stay with the times and take into account what the youngsters that we want would like themselves, I think we are doing a good job of it.
Thank you, sir. The Air Marshal has spent a lot of time with us for this interview today. I'd like to confess that as a young boy, joining the Air Force was a dream for me as well, and I'm sure it is the same for many of you out there. We'd like him to maybe leave you with a message as to what makes the Indian Air Force a fantastic place for a young man or woman to start a career. So you had a long time in uniform. If you could just tell our audience out there what makes the Indian Air Force a fantastic place to be part of and build one's career.
I think it, at some time or the other, it is every child's dream to look up at the sky, maybe see the contrail of an aircraft passing by, and to wish that he or she were there piloting it. I'm very, very certain, I'm almost certain that everybody, at least once in their life, have wanted to be a pilot. Piloting aircraft is fun. It allows you to actually unshackle yourself from the bounds of terrestrial domains and do things that very few have had the opportunity to do. But it's not only about piloting. The Air Force is all about aircraft. It's about new technologies. It's about making use of these aircraft and allowing national security to be enhanced through air defense. We have a variety of roles that we have for young men and women at every level in the Air Force. It allows you the opportunity to see various different portions of our country. Other than one particular state, I have been officially to every state of our country. And it allows you to be at the very, very front edge of whatever new is coming into at least the country today, if not in the world. Alongside that, it is an exciting career. It is an exciting, it's a very exciting role that you play. If I am to look at the patriot in everybody, it's also at the forefront of patriotism. And towards that, it kind of ticks every box. It's a wonderful career. It's a wonderful place to be. It allows you to see new places and meet all kinds of new people. And at the same time, you're doing something that is probably the most noble profession in the world. What more could you ask for? I think it is something that every young man or man and woman would love to do. And I think the Air Force is a place where they would enjoy doing it. And I look forward to having more and more youngsters come to us for us to tell them what they would do here. We'd love to show them around, and we'd love to give them a little taste of what we do on a regular basis, towards which very often these days and more, we invite young school children to our Air Force stations, to our museums. We interact with them, and I believe it is making a difference, and it is allowing more and more people an insight into what the Air Force is all about. It's only going to improve in times to come, and I look forward to this kind of participation from them as well.
Thank you very much, sir. So if you've been watching this interview, the Indian Air Force is looking for you. If you're a young individual looking for a career, the Indian Air Force has that to offer. If you're an Indian company or startup, the Indian Air Force is looking for you to support them. And for the Indian public in general, they're always on guard on the borders. We'd like to thank Air Marshal Dharkar for his time. So thank you very much for making the time to speak to us.
Thank you so very much, Atul. This was really interesting.
Thank you so much, sir.